Hi, welcome back. My name is Anna. I work for Community Kitchen Programs of Calgary, and I run a program called Calgary's Cooking. Today's feature is talking about knives, specifically knife safety. Okay, so as a quick review, we want to make sure that our cutting board that we are working on does have a grip under it. So what I've done is I've already taken the liberty to put a grip under it, but I can show you. So underneath this cutting board, there is a grip. Now you can find these grips at any dollar store. They usually come in a big roll or a bit of a big roll, and you can cut it down to size. The reason why you want to use a grip, whether it's the grip that I have here or a wet, damp cloth, is that it will keep your cutting board nice and stable. And that is the trick to working with knives safely, is you need a nice, stable, safe, clear surface to work on. Now, if you don't have a grip, what can happen is your cutting board will slip. And the more that it slips, the less control that you have on your cutting board, which then is introduced to the knife, and the less control you have on your knife. And you don't want to cut yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick introduction on the types of knives that I have in front of me and what their purposes are. So we have our first big knife here, which is a 12-inch chef's knife. Okay? It is basically a steel knife with a plastic grip on it. The grip is easy to clean, so when you're holding it with your hand, it's easy to clean. Okay, so that's a 12-inch chef's knife. The next knife I have here is a 10-inch chef's knife. Again, same idea, stainless steel blade itself, black handled plastic grip. The next size that I have are paring knives. I've got two types here. I've got just a plain paring knife with a plain set of plain blade, and then I have another chef's or paring knife with a serrated. Now the difference between the two of them is serrated is really good if you're cutting tomatoes or cutting any type of a soft fruit or vegetable that maybe you need a little bit more of a grip with, whereas a plain paring knife would be really good for some very small pieces of meat or any kind of activity where you need a little bit more close attention to detail, okay? At home, I usually have about 5 or 6 of these each because these are knives that you will use a lot as you cook. Now, a specialty knife that I do find works really well for cutting through things like cake and bread is a heeled serrated knife. And the reason why we call it a heeled serrated knife is because there's a little bit of a heel right here. And it has a serrated edge, so what it does is it basically saws through things as opposed to chopping through things, okay? So this is a really good type of knife to use when you're cutting through fresh bread, if you're slicing off a piece. This would be really good if you're cutting through hard pieces of cheese. And then the serrated paring knife would be really good if you're cutting through a tomato, okay? The other thing is with knife maintenance and knife safety is you want to make sure that your knives are sharpened and that you're always working with a sharp knife. The reason being is if you do unfortunately cut yourself with a sharp knife, it is going to result in a fairly clean cut. Just it will go straight through. Whereas if you cut yourself with a dull knife, it will actually tear more than it will slice. So what that means is that if it tears, it's probably going to hurt more and it probably won't heal as quickly or heal as cleanly as if you did cut yourself with a sharp knife. Now, nobody wants to cut themselves, but it's always a good idea to just make sure that your knives are always kept sharp. Now, there are several ways to sharpen your knives. There are electric knife sharpeners on the market if you wish. Whichever works for you is completely fine. I find that using a steel is a really good idea to sharpen a knife. The one thing though to keep in mind with a steel is that it helps keep an edge. If you feel up to it, you can always take your knives into an actual professional knife sharpener, which I would highly recommend probably at least once a year. If you use your knives or do lots of cooking throughout the year, you might want to take them in a couple of times a year. Now, there are a couple of ways to use a steel. You can either do what I do, which is put the edge of the steel onto a cloth, preferably a wet cloth, okay? And what this will do is will help give grip to the knife steel. And then you take your knife and then you just run the blade, the edge of the blade, at about a 45-degree angle against the steel, okay? Every so strokes, you want to check your blade of your knife to make sure that it is sharpened. If you need to go back a couple of times, no big deal. Okay, and you would do that with each knife that you are going to be using. Okay, again, 45 degree, just like so. There are some people that will do it the opposite way, where they're holding the steel up like this, and then they are sharpening it this way. Either way is perfectly fine, whatever you are comfortable with, okay? And again, small paring knife, same idea, okay? Now, when it comes to a serrated blade, such as this serrated paring knife or this serrated bread knife, there are steels on the market that are really small. They're probably about this big. And what you do is you would take it and you would run each serrated edge through the steel, okay? So instead of doing this motion, what you're doing is you are literally going between each tine in the knife blade and sharpening it that way. A lot of people don't end up doing it because it is very time consuming, but that is one of the ways that you can sharpen this. Otherwise, you can take it to a professional knife sharpener. Now, when it comes to slicing vegetables and how to hold your knife, one thing to keep in mind is you want to use the right knife for the job. So because this is a piece of celery that isn't too big, I'm not going to use the 12-inch. Instead, I'm going to use a 10-inch, okay? The other thing you want to do is you don't want to use a knife that's too small. And the reason being is that, again, it could be inefficient and you could run the risk of cutting yourself. So, 10-inch knife, piece of celery. What I like to do is cut the celery rib in half, just like so. And then when you cut, you are basically doing a rocking motion, okay, as opposed to a chopping motion, okay? The other thing you want to do is you want to hold your fingers, you want to curl them back when you're holding on to the item so that the knife is actually going against the front part of your fingers, and that will prevent you from cutting your fingers, okay? So I'll demonstrate. So you'll see my fingers are curled back, and I'm doing this, and I'm rocking, okay? What we do instinctively want to do when we're in the kitchen, when we're cutting, is we want to do this. Okay? Problem with that is, again, your fingers are going to get in the way and you're going to chop your fingers, and you don't want to do that. Okay? So again, a nice rocking motion, curl your fingers back. Okay? And it doesn't matter if it's celery or if it's a carrot. Again, nice rocking motion. Now with a carrot, because a carrot is round, sometimes it likes to move on the cutting board a little bit. So what I like to do is I will cut it in half, and then the flat side I will put down. So now it's a nice stable surface, okay? And again, nice rocking motion, okay? Not chopping, okay? Rocking, okay? Now for an onion is a little bit different, okay? So what you want to do, I like to call it top and tail. You want to top and tail your onion. So you cut off the end bits. You take the skin of the onion off. Cut it in half, again, making sure your hand is out of the way. Put the flat side down, And then I take my knife, and this is where it's really important to have a sharp knife. I take my knife and I'm going to cut into the onion. I'm going to slice into it, almost all the way, but not quite. And I'm going to work my way up. Now you'll notice how I've got my hand on the onion. I'm holding it with this part of my hand. And that again is to anchor the onion so that it doesn't slip on me, okay? Now I'm going to take the tip of my knife and I'm going to cut into the onion. Again, moving, keeping my fingers out of the way. And then I'm going to go back to the rocking motion. Keeping my fingers out of the way. And there you go. Now, using the serrated bread knife, here's my bread. I want to cut it into cubes, maybe for croutons or for to go on onion soup. So again, here's my serrated bread knife, and I'm going to cut. And now you'll notice that the motion is just a little bit different. Instead of rocking, it's now sawing, okay? Allowing the divots in the blade to do the work for me, okay? Just sawing right into the bread. And fun fact, bread is incredibly difficult to slice if it comes out of the oven. So my suggestion to you is at least wait a day before you start cutting into fresh baked bread. Okay? And then again, making sure your fingers are out of the way. If it makes it easier, divide the bread up into sections and then just cut a little bit at a time. That concludes our knife safety course. If you're curious about what sort of knives to have in your kitchen, my suggestion is get yourself a medium-sized knife, a larger size knife, and a paring knife. Thank you so much for your time and spending it with me. Have yourself a great day.